is enough for now. Super happy.
Welcome to another episode of Video Store Rejects, a podcast where we discuss directors' filmographies and our favorite film franchises. We are currently in the whimsical world of Wes Anderson and the fantastical world of Guillermo del Toro. We are going to be covering Wes Anderson today with his fourth feature film. It's very debated whether this is his best film amongst fans or his worst film or his most Wes Anderson-y movie. That's Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. I'm your host, Cody House. With me are my co-hosts, Chris Jacobs, our content and social media person,
How's it going?
and our checker and research expert, Lindsay Jacobs.
Hello.
And today we have a very special guest. She's returning to the show. She claimed this movie even before Wes Anderson was ever going to be a topic of discussion. She said, if you ever do Wes Anderson, I'm there, and this is the movie I'm going to be talking about. Welcome, Samantha. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here, and man, I am ready to get started.
So obviously, I know you're a fan of Wes Anderson because it was like, I think the first director you mentioned, maybe Peter Jackson was the other one, but Wes Anderson was either number one or number two. What was your first film? Was it Rushmore? Was it Royal Tenenbaums? Or did you actually start at the beginning with Bottle Rocket?
So I didn't start with Bottle Rocket. I hadn't seen Bottle Rocket till recently. That's probably the most recent film I've watched of his that I hadn't seen before, which even though it was the first one. My first one that I remember, I think it was Rushmore. And I didn't see it in theaters. It came on syndication, like Comedy Central or something like that. And I remember watching it and I thought, what a weird movie. Like, I couldn't quite figure it out at first. I was like, I don't think I get it. Well, it was one of those things that came on again and I watched it. And then suddenly I was like, this movie is very quirky, but I like it. Like, it fits my quirky. So the first one that I remember, it would be Rushmore. The first one that really caught my attention and I was like, whoa, I love this director, is this movie, is Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. That's the movie that made me really stand up and pay attention to Wes Anderson, and that was it. That's when I was hooked with Steve Zissou.
So what do you love about this movie per se that makes it maybe your favorite or just one of your favorite movies?
So Wes Anderson is the king of dry humor. And this movie is full of so many throwaway lines. Like, if you're not paying attention, you miss them. But they're so great. They're so expertly delivered. They're so expertly driven. Like, the reason for saying them is there. But they're so subtle that if you're not paying attention or you're not into it, you miss it. I think that may be the reason a lot of people dislike this movie, is that they're not understanding the humor and what's driving the humor, and they're not really understanding like the subtext storyline, like kind of going throughout this film. I think that's the thing I love the most about it, is just that dry, off-brand humor, these little throwaway lines that are just the funniest things. I've watched this movie, I'm not exaggerating, I've watched this movie well over 100 times. It's one of my absolute favorites. It is one of my feel-good movies. Like, if I'm upset, put on Life Aquatic. If I'm sick, put on Life Aquatic. If it's just a random Saturday, put on Life Aquatic. It's just one of those films. And I still catch things, even now, that I've never seen before. This last viewing, we watched it yesterday just to be ready for today. There's a scene towards the end of the film. Ned and Steve are standing on the Belafonte and they're talking, and Klaus is in the background, like way in the background. And I've never seen Klaus back there before. And he's mimicking what both of them are doing as they're doing it. And at one point in time, they both put their hands in and like, woo! And in the background, Klaus also puts his hands in and then woo, in the very back. And I was like, that's why I
It's
love
so
Wes
whimsical.
Anderson. Like, you put that in there for me as a gem for me to find it 10 plus years later.
Speaking of Klaus and the incredibly talented Willem Dafoe,
Yes.
who my birthday buddy, we share a birthday.
Aw.
He's probably my favorite in this movie because I just love how he just wants to be a part of whatever Team Zissou's doing. And he's
Yeah.
like the biggest cheerleader. He wants to be Steve's best friend. He gets so angry when anyone criticizes Steve. He's like his most loyal friend, even though I think Steve sometimes takes advantage. Well, Steve takes advantage of everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like how he slaps Owen Wilson's character when he's taking the trash out and like threatens him.
Yeah, because Klaus is so threatened by Ned because
Yeah.
Ned's now the new guy vying for Steve's attention, and Klaus has no idea how to handle that. He cannot handle anyone
Right.
vying for the attentions of Steve. Plus, there, kind of this other thing that's going on is, we kind of see in this movie that Steve is the one really suffering from Esteban's death, but we don't really take into account that Klaus is also suffering from Esteban's death. We know, just given context and everything else, that Klaus was probably very close to Esteban too. So he's got this kind of like, I've just lost Esteban. I don't want to lose Steve. There's now this new guy kind of threatening this pushback of like Steve being my best friend. So Klaus is like a wash of emotions that I think Willem Dafoe balances so beautifully and so well that it really, like, some of his lines are my absolute favorites. Absolute favorites. You're right. You're talking about when Owen Wilson's taking out the trash. He's like, "I'll see you, Sonny. I see you." And slaps him. It's all those.
Well, Cody,
so
you mentioned
brilliantly done.
back when we watched Bottle Rocket, you mentioned that the way he writes his characters is like the kids in these movies act more adult than the adults do. Like the roles are switched, so when you look at them, they're all very like they're acting like a bunch of little kids. Like especially with the jealousy part and the way just like the interns were more adult almost and poor interns.
All the actual work of the interns.
Poor interns that don't even get a pass. They get it incomplete. Well, except for that one guy who got stabbed by a machete but stayed on. He got an A.
Yeah,
I mean, he should have.
You're getting an A.
I mean, he should have gotten his degree right then and there. Like,
right?
Yeah.
Interesting thing, that kid or guy is actually Wes Anderson's assistant.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
and apparently he had to perm his hair 3 times while they were making this movie.
Yeah.
To keep the haircut.
Nice. So, I'm going to mention, I grew up reading National Geographic. It is one of my all-time favorites. I still read it. I used to have a massive collection before it got donated to the sheriff's department, which I regret because I miss them. But anyway, what I love about this is, to me, it feels like a parody of Jacques Cousteau and that whole era when he was big, and I used to read about him all the time. He was like, it's almost like every issue had a Jacques Cousteau article in there. He was huge in the 60s and 70s, and it had that whole aesthetic. And I don't know if it was just me, but it seems like in every one of his movies there's a massive collection of National Geographic somewhere in the background. Like you'll spot them somewhere. So I don't know if it's a connection he has, or if it's just some random occurrence that
I
that they're
get
that
the
way
sense
or what, but
from Wes Anderson's background that his parents and his family is very intellectual.
mhm.
And I would not be surprised if they subscribe to National Geographic, they watch PBS, they listen to
sure.
NPR,
Right.
So I think it.
People, I have some of those in my family.
That's just a
So
favorite part, though. I love that he showcases that, and because I'm such a nerd.
Whoever's collection of Nat Geos that is needs like
Yeah.
cast credit in the
I'm National
on the
Geographic
IMDb
nerd, and I'm
page.
like, I spot that in every movie that I watch. I'm like, oh man, there's like a National Geographic's in the background. I'm like, that's a nice collection.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's his or his brother's personal collection, because his brother does a lot of the artwork in his movies and for the
Mhm.
Criterion covers of
Well,
these
that's cool.
discs. Speaking of Criterion, I have the Blu-ray, and the stop motion animation that Henry Selick does in this movie just looks
Beautiful.
gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
that was well done.
So this is probably sidestepping into where Wes Anderson finally decides to do stop motion, because he's done 2 films now in it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Those are going to be fun when we get to those. So I'm excited for Isle of Dogs, and I liked Fantastic Mr. Fox.
I think
But
that one's probably my second favorite, honestly. Fantastic
Mhm.
Mr. Fox. I
that
love
movie's
that movie.
just so charming, and I love that they don't
Mhm.
say actual cuss words; they just say "what the cuss."
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're adorable woodland creatures. They can't say words like that.
Right.
But
Kinda
getting
going
back to why,
what
oh,
No, you were
sorry.
saying the same
Yep.
exact thing.
Well, we're probably gonna make different points, so go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, kind of going back to the National Geographic and Jacques Cousteau and that whole thing. This movie is a love letter to that. Like it is,
Mhm.
it is. Wes Anderson has said so. Like it is his ode to Jacques Cousteau. It's his ode to like kind of this 1960s, 1970s, exploring the deep, exploring the unknown, exploring the ocean, and that's what he wanted. He wanted it to be a love letter
Mhm.
to that, and the character of Steve Zissou was originally going to be called Cousteau. Like that was supposed to be the last name of the character. And they
Mhm.
thought it was maybe a little too on the nose, and other things happened, and they ended up, of course, changing it. But it's one of those things that they were doing a lot of parallels with
Mhm.
his own life. Jacques Cousteau's son actually died in a plane crash.
Oh wow.
So it's kind of like, you know, art,
Mhm.
life imitating art, and all that. And so I wouldn't be surprised if all of those Nat Geos are 100% Wes Anderson's that he carries around with him everywhere he goes. There is emotional support, National Geographics.
I was gonna bring that up later, but there were so many points that were coming into my head as people were talking. But getting back to why maybe some people don't like this movie or think it's his worst one, I think is because if you don't like those eccentric Wes Anderson-y charms or aesthetics that are in his movies, I feel like this is like the most like Wes Anderson-y stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Agreed.
so if you're like, oh, you're just worrying too much about making sure all the colors match and all this, off-kiltered humor that's very dry and it's not
Mhm.
making me laugh. Which I don't know how you can not laugh when this movie has Bill Murray, Willem Dafoe, Jeff Goldblum. I mean, there's so many people in here that are just giving comic gold.
Yeah.
That whole scene, that's probably I have several favorite scenes in this, but this was probably I'd have to say number 2, but where Bill Murray just takes the gun and there's gunfire everywhere, and all of his whole team is just tied up, and they're just getting shot at, and they're blindfolded, so bullets are just whizzing all around, and he's not hitting anything. Well, he's hitting a few people, but he's just firing everywhere, and there are bullets. That whole scene was awesome to me. That was That was pretty badass Wes Anderson right there.
I know when I first saw it when I was like 18 or 19 and it plays that Iggy Pop and the Stooges song, I'm like, oh, hell yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a perfect song.
I was
then-
watching it through our surround sound last night, and I was like, "Yeah, okay, that's
how you're
that's
supposed
why
to
I
watch
like
a
this
movie with a
scene.
good
It's
soundtrack.
probably the Iggy Pop, that and the brain fart.
Who? What?
I'm embarrassed.
If you don't know the
Starman.
name, I don't know the name.
David
Well,
Bowie.
I
David
mean-
Bowie, yes.
The
I
David
mean,
Bowie.
David
where he just
Bowie's
walks.
throughout
he's
this
talking-
movie. I mean, I love the I don't know the actor's name, but the guy who plays Pele, the Portuguese.
George.
Yeah,
His and he did all these songs and interpreted them in Portuguese. I love that of this
Yeah.
movie. Like,
Yeah, are we
Well,
gonna go
another
ahead and just dive
standout
into
is
the
where he's-
soundtrack right now? Because I have a lot to say about the soundtrack.
oh yeah. Well, he's
Like, I don't know if we're
I got-
ready
I
to
gotta
like,
mention one
offshoot
more
onto
scene.
the soundtrack because you got some time because I got
Well, one scene, the first scene that stands out is where he's talking to Ned, and he just leaves him. And he's like, "Hang on, I'll be right back." And he walks like the whole length of the ship, and then goes up to the bow and like hits a J, and it all just kind of like whoa, 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 and then he goes back to Ned, like, okay,
Where you had to have a mini trip just to
He
be
had
able
to-
to handle that conversation.
yeah, he had to leave just enough to go like, I don't know, whatever he had to do, and then come back, and it was just like an abrupt. He's just back, and he's like, "All right, I'm ready to talk now."
It's like the trope when someone's like, "Would you excuse me for a moment?" and they step away to scream really loud off camera. It's kind of like that, but you get to see him stare into the void for a minute to kind of get a handle on dealing with meeting somebody who might be his son.
well, talking about how dry this humor is and everything, I think this is also Wes's most melancholy film. Like with all the emotions going on.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is one of those things of kind of going on with that scene. What Wes Anderson does so well is, in most films or plays or stories we're telling, when you do have this moment of, excuse me, let me step away for a moment, it's either something comical or you don't see it through the perspective of the person who stepped away. You see it through the perspective of the person they were talking to. Well, what Anderson does is he always shows it to you from the perspective of the person that needs to step away. And that happens in this movie multiple times in different ways. Like that scene is one of my favorites because when Ned's standing there and Bill Murray's almost past him and Ned says, "Excuse me, sir, my name is Ned Plimpton." And Bill Murray stops and goes, "Okay, man." And just keeps on walking like, okay, like I don't know you. But it doesn't register who he is, even though Bill Murray should know who he is. And then he has to get his attention and says, "Excuse me, my mother was Catherine Plimpton." And that's when you see the emotional adjustment instantly happen on Bill Murray when he turns around and he's like, "Oh, this is about to happen." And they have a little, chit chat, and that's when he has the moment of, "Will you excuse me for just a second?" And then that moment of walking away, and you can totally, you see everything through Bill Murray's perspective, and they don't leave you with Owen Wilson. They leave you with Bill Murray. And that happens a lot. That happens. There's another scene. It's probably my favorite scene in the whole film. They're at the hotel on one of the Ping Islands when they're looking for Captain Hennessy's crew, and they're trying to rescue their Bond company stooge. And Steve kind of comes up to the edge of the banister, and he's like, "Oh, we picked the wrong island. We got to go to another one, but I don't know if we have enough gas to get there." Damn it, Steve! And where it could just be the funniest thing ever, we all collectively feel it. Like, I have been there when you've been so mad at yourself, and then he trips and falls down the stairs. And they get to the end of the stairs, and the guy's still filming him. The camera's in his face, and he's like, "Excuse me, guys, can I have a moment with my son?" And everyone just kind of scurries away. And Ned looks at him so worried. He goes, "Are you okay?" "Not really." That's my favorite line in the whole movie is the "not really." Just that moment of that emotional adjustment. And it's so perfect that you're like, damn, I feel every bit of that. Like, even though it's so funny, I feel that. Like, I'm there for that. I have been there where you're laying on the floor. Like, "Are you okay?" "Not really." Just not.
Well, if we're gonna get into the soundtrack, I gotta say that scene where Ned approaches him and then he takes that long walk and we hear Life on Mars. That's probably my favorite sequence of the soundtrack in the film is with that song. And that moment that Steve has, like, just not dealing with, oh, this guy's about to tell me he's my son. My best friend died. I premiered my movie and everyone trashed it.
Mm. Yeah, that was standout.
I think my favorite song usage. Oh God, I got a bunch. I have a bunch, but I think honestly, it would be the end credits with the ode to what is it, Buckaroo Banzai? There at the
Yeah.
end, the walking
No.
music, another David Bowie song because this is also a love letter to David Bowie. You know, they do Queen Bitch at the end, and and I love how it starts because Bill Murray picks up the kid, puts him on his shoulder, and then Wes Anderson does classic Wes Anderson, slow it down. It goes tap tap tap, like it's kind of this breathy sound, and then it picks up, and off they go, and it's like this beautiful moment. I'm like, man, I don't know who picked out all the songs, but good job. Good job. You did a great job. I think
And
that's
Jeff
my favorite one.
Goldblum's in Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I
Yep.
forgot that.
The cowboy.
I'm still in
Also-
touch. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, if again we're talking about the soundtrack, so the guy who does all the music, like the music, like the Pink Lightning
Mhm.
Strike songs, all the different like kind of electronic, melodies, stuff. That's the lead singer of the band Devo, Mark Mothersbaugh. And
Yeah.
when you know that, suddenly it makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
And
He's a Devo kid.
That music plus David Bowie, like how all these things are so melodic, it just forms a perfect soundtrack for this film.
And I'm pretty sure he's done the music for every Anderson film or most of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
He has.
Royal Tenenbaums. He did
Yeah.
Tenenbaums.
Goldblum is wearing Mark Mothersbaugh's glasses in this film, which apparently he's legally blind without them.
Without them.
So,
Oh wow.
so poor guy while they're filming the scenes with Goldblum.
Hey, I did notice that Jeff Goldblum towards the end, he was wearing a Dr. Pepper shirt. So do you think that's a nod to Texas? It's an
Yeah,
I'm
and
a
I
Pepper
think
shirt.
there's a UT Austin something in that scene too, because that's Wes Anderson's alumni.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
one
like,
of the pirates.
hey, nod to
wearing
Texas
it.
there, buddy.
Actually, that Dr. Pepper shirt was also featured in Bottle Rocket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The gun guy's wearing it that sells them the guns.
Mm-hmm. It's the same shirt.
Nice.
So that's amazing that shirt. Well, it might have been baggy on the gun guy because I'm like, Jeff Goldblum looks pretty
Packed in there.
he looks got some guns wearing that shirt. Like he looks jacked.
Jeff Goldblum's pretty. I mean, he's a fairly athletic build guy and being super tall. So yeah, he was popping those sleeves out a little bit.
But getting back to all these people kind of acting like children because they're jealous. Everyone is so jealous of each other in this movie. Like Klaus is jealous of Ned because Ned is pulling away attention to Steve and maybe being his friend or son. Steve is jealous of Ned because Kate Blanchett is in love with, or I don't know if she's in love with him, but she at least has formed an attraction with Ned. And Steve so much wants to sleep with her, he accuses her of being a lesbian because how dare she not be attracted to him?
What a trash move, Filmer.
You know,
Come
and
on.
speaking of, that's one thing that I did notice. There was a lot of similarities between Steve and Royal when it came to homophobia and bigotry. Like that really stood out in those characters. So him being from Texas, I wonder if that was a daddy issue that he had, like
that he's working out with all these movies.
Like, was his dad kind of?
I wonder if Wes Anderson did have daddy issues for a long time, because a lot of these earlier films, till we get to, I would say, Fantastic Mr. Fox, have sort of this father-son or father-child relationship and like lack of a good dad. Like it's bad dad movies. Even though in Rushmore the dad's a great dad, I guess it's more so Bill Murray's character who is a bad dad in that movie too.
Right.
I think I find that all to be very interesting because, you know, as someone who I grew up in Louisiana, but spent a lot of time in East Texas. That, you know, the people that we're kind of talking about here, you know, we do still even have that carryover today, where, you know, if someone gets, I don't know, like backed against the wall, or if they get offended or something, like the first thing that kind of comes to their mind is something more offensive to defend themselves with than actually like rationalizing what the real problem is. So it's easier to call you a name, or easier to be, you know, homophobic or something like that. And I just think that is a very interesting trope that gets used in these films. As someone who's from that part of the world is like, yep, I know these people, and I'm sure Wes Anderson, growing up in Van, Texas, or around that area, he knows these people, and it does show somewhat in these films. Like, this is a problem we have, and this is a problem that these people have, and it makes these people kind of awful, like the things that you don't like about them. Because Steve's awful. Like, Steve's kind of an awful person. He's not a good person. Even though he's our antagonist, he's horrible. He's a horrible person. Horrible dad. Like, you've known about your son basically the entirety of his life, and you tell him, well, I didn't want to be a dad. I hate dads, and I never wanted to be one. Like, you tell him that. Like, that's the worst thing to ever come out of your mouth. And you pulled a gun on Jane when she was interviewing you. So you're pretty bad. So I think it's very interesting that we address these tropes with these male characters.
Well, and he became like it's questioned that perhaps he's not the father, but when he says he didn't want to be a dad because his dad was bad, like you became the thing you didn't want to be because you were refusing to be a dad.
Yeah,
like you became a bad dad.
Thanks, Wes Anderson, for helping us all work through those issues together.
And, you know, that's why he named being homophobic with Jeff Goldblum. He's jealous of Jeff Goldblum, too, because Jeff Goldblum's more successful. He was married to his wife, and you could say Jeff Goldblum is a more attractive man than Bill Murray.
I mean, yeah, you could say it, and it's true.
That also seems to be part of why he treats his wife so poorly. Like, he only wanted her because Jeff Goldblum had her, almost. Yeah. Because Jeff Goldblum gets all the research money, and he gets all the renown, and he has people that want to work for him.
And her parents funded like 2 of his films.
Yeah, he just takes advantage of the money she has access to. Gosh, I felt so bad for her character just over and over. Steve's such a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Wes Anderson. You had Angelica Houston married to 2 jerks back to back.
Yeah.
Poor woman.
Yeah. And I think that's honestly where where it starts. So we don't see this in the film. We don't even really talk about it, but you can kind of put the subtext together of, you know, they say in the movie that Jeff Goldblum and Bill Murray were roommates at the academy. Well, I bet you they were both already vying for her attention, for Eleanor's attention at that time. And Jeff Goldblum's the one who ends up with her at that time. Because if you kind of look at the timeline a little bit, by the time Steve and Eleanor get married, she's what, like 35? Because they have this moment of like, oh, well, maybe it's a cop-out. You were too old to have kids. And she's like, it's more than a cop-out, Steve. I was 35.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've already kind of, if you kind of break that timeline down, it seemed like they already would have known Eleanor when they were roommates at the academy. So we already have this male rivalry, you know, this kind of like puffed up chest, like who's going to get Eleanor, and then they still are fighting for her at this point in the film when they're probably both in their, you know, 50s, you know, kind of putting a timestamp on it. of this poor woman has had to deal with both of their shit this whole time.
Is it just me,
Yeah.
or are they both mispronouncing her name on purpose? Her name is Eleanor, and they call her Eleanor, like the real hick pronunciation of it. And it just, maybe I'm just imagining like the light dying in her eyes every time either one of them calls her name. But it's like everybody else knows what her name is and says it correctly, except for the two men in her life who might as well marry each other for all the attention they pay to her, fighting over her.
Yeah, that's
Well,
a great observation.
I don't know how that joke lands now, because that was another part of the movie, was them like constantly referring to Jeff Goldblum as gay, and then he even says, "I'm part gay." So, like, I mean, wouldn't he just be bisexual then if he's part gay? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that falls under like by erasure then, because David Bowie and Freddie Mercury famously were like, well, we're not like super straight, obviously, but people are like, oh, well, then they're gay, not bisexual, but specifically like secretly gay and only date women as a cover. That's like a problem that bisexual men and women face. Is you have to pick a side for some reason. You can't be either one.
Yeah, you can't be both. And also at this time when this movie came out, which was, what was it, 2014? No, or 04?
2004.
Our terminology was even a little different. You know, as far as like what was bisexual, as kind of how we're defining it as it's become more definable. And so I think for the joke in the film, if you want to call it the joke, it lands with the, well, I'm part gay. Well, what if you're saying part, are you talking like 1%? Or are you talking 99%? Because then it kind of puts you on a scale of, well, I'm part gay, and it leaves you with a level of ambiguity of like, well, you know, what exactly is he saying? Where at that time, and even now, if you're like, I'm bisexual, it's men and women. And so it's kind of one of the things that in 2004, maybe we hadn't quite defined what that was for what his joke payoff was going to be. And again, this is kind of, is this a cop-out? It's more than a cop-out. But I think that's where that falls in there of, I'm part gay. And it leaves you filling in the blank of what part it is, or how much the percentage is, you know, that sort of thing.
And we weren't where we are now with the support and openness of the LGBTQ community. I mean, we still have leagues of ways to go, but it was even worse in 2004.
Sure.
I'm trying to think, who else is jealous? I think that's about all the jealousy and being thrown around in this movie.
I mean, I think Steve's jealous of a lot of people. I think Steve's jealous of Jeff Goldblum, which we established. He's jealous of Owen Wilson because he's getting attention. I think he's also jealous of, I can't say his name right, but Michael Gambon's character, the guy who's his financier. You know, I think that there's a level of jealousy on that part because he takes out a lot of his frustration on him. And I don't know if it's quite jealousy, but he seems to be kind of like the punching bag of Steve at parts. And while he does kind of push back and retaliate back, you know, they get into, you know, some screaming matches sometimes. He seems to be the guy that he yells at the most.
Yeah.
I think Steve, you know, he takes advantage of everybody that's on this boat, doesn't really consider anyone's feelings. I mean, he treats Eleanor terribly, cheats on her all the time.
Yeah. I mean, he does treat the crew. No, he doesn't treat the crew good. I'm like, he treats the crew good. No, he doesn't. He really doesn't.
Well, I mean, he totally ignores Anne Marie as the script girl. It's like, because she's like, we're going into uncharted waters. This is dangerous. She's like
the smartest person on the boat, and she's script girl and intern wrangler for some reason. And what, I can't remember who it is. Somebody asks when they're breaking into the C lab. They're like, "Isn't this stealing?" And he's like, "No, we'll get it back to him." Like, yeah, we're definitely breaking in. We're definitely going to take stuff, but sure, we'll return it at some unspecified future date.
That's the company guy. And
Poor
then
company guy.
And then Steve's like, "You do whatever you got to do to cover your ass, man, but we're doing this."
We're stealing.
Yeah, I think the Bond Company stooge, Bill Ubell, is probably one of my favorite characters. Bud Cort is one of the most adorable actors to exist on the planet, and he is so precious as Bob Ubell. And just the scrapes he gets himself in to stick his neck out for Steve, who does not deserve it in any way.
Mm-mm.
Like, man, like his Steve's redeeming quality is that he does at least go and try to save the Bond Company stooge. He does.
Right.
He does try to get Bill out of this. Or wait, is it Bob or Bill? Bob Ubell, Bill Ubell. Bob. It's Bob. Goes and gets them out of this scrape. And I just think this poor guy has no idea what he's stepping into. Like, he gets on the Belafonte, and it is just like the craziest world he has stepped into, and then he gets attacked by Filipino pirates and they take him off. It's just poor. He's my favorite character, honestly. I think he really is the Bond Company stooge.
He has
shout out to the Belafonte, the name Belafonte, by the way.
Oh yeah,
the Belafonte, Harry Belafonte,
yeah.
Banana Boat.
Yeah, the Calypso, Harry Belafonte. Yeah, no, I love that. I just think.
But yeah, he has so many lines of gold in this movie, and unfortunately, he speaks Filipino, so of course they're gonna take him as a prisoner.
Yeah.
But like in the elevator, he's like, "I'm a human. I have feelings too," and like,
Steve's like stand up for himself. He's like, "I'm not just a stooge. I have feelings. I'm real," and he's like. Such a well-rounded character for just being like the guy who follows people around and sees and tells everybody how much money they have left.
Yeah,
and they even let him put his hand like when he does the little
Zissou.
Yeah, and then of course he's like, "No, don't shoot the kid who was like nice to me."
Yeah. Oh, it's precious. He's like, "No, that's Cedric. That's a friend," and then he waves at him, and the kid's like grilling a lobster or something, a crab, whatever. He's so precious. All of his lines are so funny, and they're precious, and they're honest. One of my favorite ones he says is him and Jeff Goldblum are standing in the kitchen on the Belafonte, and Jeff Goldblum's like, "Is this my espresso maker? How'd you guys get my espresso maker?" And Bud Cort looks at him like, "We fucking stole it." It's so honest. It's so funny, and it's probably the best line delivered in the whole film. Like, he's so nonchalant about it. Like, he's so worried about everything throughout the whole movie, like money, stealing, the whole thing. And then at that moment, he's like, "I give up. We stole it."
Yeah, he's so worked over by the adventure he was on that he doesn't care anymore. He's like, "We stole it, man. Yes, now."
Gosh.
So there's another actor in this movie who doesn't have a big part, but apparently he was very integral in helping like all the people who played the interns and extras to act on the camera, and he was one of the actors Anderson considered to play Max in Rushmore, and that's Noah Taylor.
Love Noah Taylor. Gosh, he's great. Did any of you guys watch the show Preacher?
Yes.
He played
I haven't seen it yet.
Hitler.
Yes, he does. And he's hilarious and great.
Good.
Nice.
And I was like, "Thank you, Noah Taylor. I'm so glad that you got this opportunity. I'm so glad to see you out there. I see you, and I'm happy for you." I think he plays Wolodarski in Life Aquatic. I think that's his character is Wolodarski. But he's so great. And yeah, he acted as the acting coach for this film. For like for the actors that this is like their first movie or something like that, who's helping them like teach them the ropes.
I wrote down in my notes while I was watching about Noah Taylor, but I didn't know his name, so I just wrote Charlie Bucket's dad. How could you work for somebody so terrible as Steve Zissou? As a reminder to look up his name, and I still didn't do it. But I love his. There's like a moment where he's talking about the dolphins, where he's like sending a signal to tell them something. He's like, well, either they can't hear us or they don't understand. He's a terrible dolphin trainer. I don't know what his other jobs are, but he's just like either worked or didn't. I don't know. What do you want from me? We're on a boat.
Yeah.
We're dolphins.
So tired of those dolphins.
Yeah.
Sick of those dolphins. Yeah. I love that almost every scene too. Like he's in the background, like doing something, but it's nothing like work. Like one of the ones, like the scene where Jane is interviewing Steve for the first time. They're like, in this big room, and he's just in the background, like dicking around, not doing anything. And then
I think he's petting that cat that shows up everywhere.
Yeah,
That
like there's the
Siamese cat.
Siamese cat, and he's just back there petting the Siamese cat. And they ask him to leave, so he picks the cat up and takes it with him. Because that's the important part, is I need to take this cat with me. I can't leave the cat. Got to take the cat. That's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah. I mean, this movie's just so many just like little pieces of gold, and I love like that there's part of the ship just looks like a dollhouse, which like when you like looks like just a construction of a dollhouse or like a stage play.
That was absolutely one of my favorite parts about this whole movie, was that whole side section, the intersection of the ships, so he could explain everything, and it was like one of his drawings. Or a list, like everything you see is meticulous and to the point, and it was perfect. I know that I just love that part.
I think that was actually the whole inspiration for the film. Wes Anderson had seen an actual ship that had been, I don't know, what would you call it, bisected? I don't know what you'd call it, but split down the middle like that. And that's kind of when the idea popped in his head. He's like, that visually is what I want. And so that whole scene of like, let me show you my ship, or let me show you around my ship. I can't remember the exact phrase, but when it splits in half, that is one of, again, so Wes Anderson-y. It's the most Wes Anderson-y thing.
Right.
But you're right. It's meticulous. It's perfect. There's nothing out of place. The color's perfect. It's like a masterclass in Wes Anderson. You want to call it that? It's beautiful.
So we've been circling around it. We've been talking about the character in question, Steve Zissou, but this role was specifically written for Bill Murray, and this is the first time, and I think it's the only time, because I think even with the new film, The French Dispatch, that's more of like an ensemble, and they're like broken into different stories. I think this is the only time he's used Bill Murray as like the center of the film.
Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to recall all the other ones. I mean, he's been in every one of them.
Right. He's only in the beginning of Darjeeling, isn't he?
Well, he shows up again in a montage, but yeah, he's only in the one scene trying to catch the train.
Yeah, but even still, there he is. He's still he doesn't have a prominent part, but we still see Bill Murray there. So this is something that Sarah and I've kind of discussed in the past, and just kind of talking about Wes Anderson as an actor. I think one of the reasons I love this movie so much and Wes Anderson movies, it must be such a ride to work with Wes Anderson. And it must be the same way for Bill Murray, because Bill Murray for the longest time was just like the Hollywood funny man, because he's hilarious. But it's so nice to give him these different roles where he can truly flex his acting muscles, and he can be the funny man and dejected and jealous and disgusting and misogynistic and all of these things all wrapped into one huge character that you kind of hate him, but you also then find the gems throughout where you love him. And it's such a great balance of a character. Like,
how much real Bill Murray was bleeding through that though? Like,
yeah. I was going to say, I think all those things sum Bill Murray up as a person.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, isn't that kind of what a person is? It's such a complex, human, with all of our different emotions. And Wes Anderson captures that, I think, better than most directors do. He captures like all of our range of emotions so well, and working with him as a director must be so liberating to be able to have someone like focus such details all the way down to like how you move, how you the beat, the pauses, how you do all these things. So I love that Bill Murray gets to be Steve Zissou. And yeah, I've heard that Bill Murray's like a great guy. He's real affable, you know, he's a real great guy, like laughter. But I also heard that he's a pain in the ass. Like he can be quite a diva, quite a dickhead, if you want to call it that. So that
Well,
this is the truth. This Steve Zissou's the truth.
the two
Apparently-
there's two instances talking about both those aspects of his personality. His diva aspect, while they were making this movie, apparently the Chicago Cubs were heavy in the playoffs, and he requested that he get live feed of the games while they were filming. And then, of course, for some reason, him and Angelica Houston did not gel on the making of this movie, which I guess they didn't have a lot of scenes together in Royal Tenenbaums because apparently they were both on set even when they weren't filming for like emotional support for Wes Anderson because of how much of a pain Gene Hackman was being on set.
Yeah.
Wow.
But apparently Bill Murray hosted a like get together or something. Lindsay was talking about this and like snubbed Angelica Houston, like didn't invite her. He invited most of the cast and crew, but like excluded her, and then like saw her later at something and acted like nothing was wrong.
Right, yeah.
So I don't know
Bill
what he
Murray
had
did.
against Angelica Houston to be so rude to her.
Who knows? You know, jealousy, that seems to be the running
Right.
gag.
I will say one thing that kind of gets on my nerves. I find Owen Wilson charming, but his accent gets on my nerves a little bit in this movie. One, because he says he's from Kentucky, and if you're from Kentucky, your southern accent is not that refined. You are not talking like you're from the deep South plantation era.
He doesn't even
more
sound like he's from
twangy.
Texas either.
And there's no Air Force of its own in Kentucky. We don't have an Air Kentucky.
Well, I
But-
figured it was an airline.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's not a like a military branch or anything. He's just a local pilot. Like
Okay.
he's not he doesn't even
'Cause all
fly for
pilots
Delta.
dress like
He
that,
he's
like
in the hub out of
airlines.
Louisville, and that's all he
Yeah.
does.
Yeah. Those old airline pilots dress like they were in, their uniforms resembled military Air Force uniforms for some reason, and how they got away with that, I don't know. But yeah, it was that channeling that 1960s, airline dress uniform. He even had the bolo, the tie.
Oh yeah,
or whatever.
the Colonel Sanders tie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Well-
Mark Twain.
That makes sense, but he makes it sound like it's some sort of official branch or something.
Yeah,
I
no,
was very
he
proud.
probably flies
Okay.
from like Louisville to like what's the other big one?
Lexington.
Lexington.
Yeah.
Like that's probably
Yeah.
all he does all day. Like on a
3-hour
processor.
flights.
Yeah, he's not a great pilot.
Yeah. So, yeah, this movie was not received warmingly when it came out. It was
No.
mixed. And it didn't do well financially, but it has gone on to get a cult following. Samantha, you're not the only person I know that says this is their favorite Wes Anderson film. I know a
Mhm.
lot of people that
I'm
are like, this
one
is
of
my
them,
favorite
yeah.
one. I love this one the most.
Yeah, you either love it or you hate it. Like it's really this one of the two. Like you either
Well,
love
isn't
it
that all of his
or you hate it.
movies? You either love it or you hate it. Like,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think he is in that class of director where the movie he himself is a genre. I
Mm.
think he's very much, even though these are all widely different directors, I think he is in the same camp as the Coen brothers, as
Mhm.
Quentin Tarantino. Like their movies are its own genre, and you're
Mhm.
either into what they're doing or you're like, I don't get this.
Yeah.
This is weird.
Yeah. And what I love about it, and I think where a lot of people don't like this movie, is the stylization of it. Again, we're kind of talking about the colors, all this stuff. Wes Anderson's known for his color, but this is one where he gets even bolder, especially the underwater scenes. This kind of like seafoam green that the water takes on. All of these stop animation puppets that get made. Like there's like a little puffer fish. That's probably one of my favorite little creatures that goes swimming by. Even the what is it? The crayon seahorse or something like that. That little
Right, that's in
bone
the
gets
little bag or
in the
earlier in the
bag,
movie.
and it's just this
Yeah.
cute little seahorse in a bag. And all of those types of things and again, it's kind of like the love letter to, Ray Harryhausen, and kind of showing this love for the stop animation that's going on. And I think either you get it or you don't, because it is kind of weird. I remember the first time I watched it, I totally got it. Like I was on board from the beginning, but I didn't love the claymation or the animation, the stop animation. I was like, why did you do that? You could have just used CGI. Like I don't care for that. And then the more I watched it, I realized, like, I see why you're doing it. I understand why you're doing it. I love it now. Now I'm so glad they didn't use CGI. I'm so glad that they used these puppets and these figures. And it's because it's so cute, and it really adds to the charm and whimsy of some of the things that are happening in this movie, where this movie needs charm and whimsy. Because you said earlier, a great word you used was melancholic. It really balances out the melancholy of this film. And I love those little puppets, and they're so cute now. But
Well, it's
I
like with
remember
the
the first time I
shark.
watched it, I didn't think they were that cute at the time.
It's like when they're in the sub and they get a glimpse of the shark, and Bill Murray breaks down, and it's such a sad scene, but the claymation shark adds, like you said, a charm to it. So you're not completely heartbroken. Like you're sad because Bill Murray's finally dealing with his PTSD of losing his friend, and losing his son, and coming to terms with how shitty everything is around him, and hopefully has figured out that he's been treating people shitty, and he breaks down and he's like, I finally get it. But that paired with that shark is beautiful. Like he did a great job with that. That is probably my first favorite scene out of that whole movie. Besides the shootout and the part where he leaves Ned to go space out for a minute, that whole scene with the shark where Bill Murray finally gets it and he breaks down was very beautiful, and that stands out. That justifies the whole movie, like, for me.
Yeah,
I think
that
Wes
movie,
Anderson.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think Wes Anderson's a much healthier person than Steve Zissou, but I feel like Wes Anderson would do things like that. Like, oh, we're going on a rescue mission. Everyone wear matching uniforms with cool hats.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite kind of gags along the way. It was like, all right, we'll get him a cappy and a Speedo.
Do all the interns get a gun? No, they have to share their Glock.
They both share one.
Yeah, that was great.
Gosh, the throwaway lines are so good. That's another one that I just love so much. Like, Anne-Marie, do the interns all get guns? No, they share one. And then there's kind of this moment of where Bill Murray's like, well, okay, take the gun anyway. It's fine. Don't worry about it. That wasn't the answer I wanted, but it's still fine. Go for it.
So I think this is, of course, you mentioned, like, with what he does with the aesthetics and the background and everything. This was his biggest budget to date that he had to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe what throws some people off is that how much he gets into the aesthetics, whereas his first three films are more just about personal relationships with humans.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very much that here too, but now it's being thrown with all this underwater sequences and stop animation fish and things that maybe people were like, why is he focusing too much on like the look and not just telling the story? But I think it's all there, and I think it's a really well done movie. I think it's up there with any other Wes Anderson movie. When I did a ranking on another video, I was like, ranking these movies is like trying to pick your favorite flavor of ice cream. It's like, what am I in the mood today? Like it could change, you know. You're
Yeah. I have yet to see a Wes Anderson film that I don't like. I just really like Wes Anderson. I love what he does with relationships. I love what he does with aesthetic. I love his color. I love his style. The dialogue is always perfect, even when it's weird, is perfect. And I was like, there are movies I like more than others. I have a least favorite of his that is still a great movie, but I still enjoy it, even though it's my least favorite of his. It's not a least favorite movie, period. You know what I mean? So I never get tired of Wes Anderson. Like once I finally like stumbled upon him and kind of put all the pieces together of like what we're trying to do, I was on board. I was like, you got me. You got me.
So are you excited about the French Dispatch then?
Yes. I didn't even let you finish asking. Yes.
Yeah, I can't wait. Sadly, it's going to be a stream, so I don't know when that's going to be, but I'm excited for it.
I believe it'll probably be a 45-day window, and then it'll be out probably around Christmas time to rent on VOD.
Well, it'll be a good Christmas present then. I can rent it and watch it.
So, yeah. And he already is announcing his next movie, which is going to have Tom Hanks in it.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see how the two of them work together.
Right. There's several that he mentioned that I can't remember who they were, but I was like, really? Wow, that's going to be.
Well, a lot of them are people he's worked with numerous times. Bill Murray's in it. Tilda Swinton's going to be in it. He's got Jeffrey Wright in there. So I'm glad he's starting to put. I don't know if Jeffrey Wright's going to have a small role, but I'm glad that he's incorporating a more diverse cast, because that is something that Wes Anderson has been criticized for, is like all the white people in his movie. And even when he does have people of color, they're kind of playing stereotypical
caricatures of themselves almost. Yeah, Darjeeling Limited kind of skirts that line, a fine line in there. Even though that movie's beautiful, like visually, man, that movie is beautiful. I think that's probably his most stunning film as far as looks. Darjeeling Limited, it's beautiful, but that may be one that's kind of a bit problematic as far as how we're these three white guys traveling across India and how we're approaching their view of these people and these people approaching them. It sometimes gets into a mess, but it's still a great film. I'm not necessarily going to justify it, but I'm just saying, like, yes, you are correct. We've got some problems. And also, like, I can maybe count on one hand the, people of color in his films. Like in this movie, there's one black guy, so George. Like, there's the guy from India who's in all the films. I can't remember the actor's name, but he was in Darjeeling Limited. I think he was also in Grand Budapest Hotel.
Oh, so in this one, there's at least two actors of color, because the sound guy.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the other guy. Yeah. Actually, there's three then. I think there's three. There's So George. There's the guy that's the Indian guy from Darjeeling Limited. All the other ones, and then there's another one. I think that's Asian. He's a taller guy. He's always without a shirt on. He never has a shirt on. It's always off. Like in all the scenes, he doesn't have any lines, but he's there.
Well, and then there's that mistress at the beginning of the film at the film festival that approaches Bill Murray.
Well, holy smokes, this might be his most diverse movie. But again, this is a problem. No, it is a problem. Like, this is something that that Wes Anderson needs to work towards. Of, like, I understand that you're dealing with a very unique quirk, but everyone's involved in the very unique quirk.
Yeah, and that is something, getting a little bit off topic, I'm not always a fan of, but I love that I'm seeing in like period pieces now, like for British period pieces, that
Hmm.
like they're diversifying the cast. Like I didn't watch Bridgerton. I don't think it's my jam, but I like that like the cast was full of all different actors of color when that's traditionally all white people usually in those type
Sure.
of stores.
Yeah, sure. I love that we're getting to that point that we're turning the corner where it's no longer having to be like justifiable. Like it's just like people existed. Put them
Right.
in a movie. Like people exist. All sorts of people, white people, brown people, I don't know, people of all shades in between, like the brown spectrums. They exist. Put them in there. Like they have stories to tell too. So yeah, I get very interested in this idea of like, well, it's only white people in England. I was like, no, it's not. You can tell the story with multiple people in it of color. So anyway, yes, I think Wes Anderson is getting there. I'm hoping get there.
One other scene I love the scene where Sergey's just jamming because he's supposed to be on lookout, and of course Ned was too, but he's busy making out with Kate Blanchett, so I can't blame him for not being on lookout.
True.
But I love that he's jamming, and the pirates just get on board the boat because he's too busy rocking out to Bowie, as you do.
And even
And
in
the
the
way he
scene, like we
tapers
get to
off,
see
he's
the
like,
boat come right up,
Yeah.
and then the ladder come right behind, like it's right behind him, and he just like stops and looks at it, like, huh? It's so funny. Gosh, it's so good.
Yeah, so I think we've covered a lot of things that we like about this movie. So before we get to rankings, Samantha, is there anything we haven't brought up that you want to talk about?
We talked about the soundtrack, and I love the soundtrack. I love that it's an ode to David Bowie. I feel like in this movie, this was probably Wes Anderson's love song to so many things. And I kind of love that because you would think with all the things that are going on, it would become a big muddy mess, but they all work together. So there's this kind of like ode to the ocean to Jacques Cousteau. There's ode to David Bowie that's happening. There's this ode to Ray Harryhausen that's going on. There's all of these great moments that we're having in this, and the soundtrack, this is one of my favorite soundtracks in a movie ever. All of the music fits so well, all the little in between songs, like the song, it's a zombie song that plays at Ned's funeral. I cannot hear that song now without crying. Like it's so perfect. That song just fits in there just right, and the soundtrack for me is just it's a perfect soundtrack if we want to go there. Is there something else like so specific I want to talk about? There's so much I could talk about that it's like, how many rabbit trails do we want to go down? You know,
Well,
Right.
I did hit on Bud Cort of how much I just adore him and how cute he was as our Bond company stooge. And then we talked briefly about Willem Dafoe. This is probably my favorite. Ooh, this is a bold statement. I don't know if I can make it. I might make it. I may retract it later, but right now I'm going to make it. This may be my favorite Willem Dafoe character. I'm going to go with it.
It's so hard for me to say who my favorite, because I just love him as an actor. And now that I know we have the same birthday, that makes me love him even more.
Yeah, I absolutely love him. And there's nothing he can't do. Like he's a comic genius. He's a master of his craft. He's great. This may be my favorite Willem Dafoe character.
I will say that I love that, because usually they cast Willem Dafoe to be like some terrifying, intimidating person, even though he probably weighs like 90 pounds.
Yeah, we could like easily lift him up and just throw him out.
But he's able to play menacing and scary so well. But I love that he's so lovable in this movie. Like he's like far from what most people cast him as in movies.
Yeah, honestly, I think this character, out of all these characters in this show, this movie, he might honestly be the healthiest emotionally. And let me explain why. It's because he will express himself in the wrong ways, but he will actually express himself. He will say, thank you for not picking me. I don't, you never picked me to be on the team with you. I'm always B squad. And then they kind of have this moment. He's like, well, we always thought of you as our little brother. And he said, he's like, I always thought of you guys as my dads. And it's like kind of this very sweet moment. And then he realized what he said out loud. He's like, don't let anybody else make fun of me for saying that. But it's still like, it's very genuine and it's so honest, but he's able to do that. Because even there, I think the moment that stands out the most is after Ned puts him on the insignia. And they're about to go up in the Whirlybird, and Klaus climbs up there and he's like, Ned, I just want to tell you, I appreciate you putting me on the patch. And Ned's like, oh, it was my pleasure. He's like, no, but you stitched me onto the dolphin. I want you to know how much that means to me. He's like, you got it, Klaus. And then finally Klaus is like, you don't get it. And he gets so angry. And then he kind of has this moment of like, but I'm not angry. We're now cool. I love you, Ned. Like, that's basically him telling him I love him. Like, I love you, Ned. Like, that moment where he can actually, like, switch that back and forth, where it's not menacing or scary, but he actually can express those emotions. Even though he does do it in a weird and maybe not the most healthy way, it still is, like, he's able to do that where no one else can. Like, no one else can actually express the emotions. It's all just kind of, like, passive aggressive, or it just stays bottled up until it just explodes, where Klaus can actually like ride the wave of it. He's so good. God, I love Willem Dafoe. Okay, anyway, we haven't talked about Jane Winslet Richardson. We haven't talked about the reporter. You guys
We
want to talk about
haven't
her?
talked enough about Kate Blanchett in this podcast, or this episode. So this was going to bring up a topic I was thinking. So this movie is an ode to, of course, David Bowie with the soundtrack. And a lot of people consider David Bowie was a celestial being, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this movie is packed with a lot of people who are considered celestial. So David Bowie, Jeff Goldblum, Kate Blanchett. Lindsay would probably argue Angelica Houston is also celestial.
Yes, she is.
that.
We should all worship at her feet. Shame on Bill Murray.
Yeah.
So
I agree
Kate
with that.
Blanchett wasn't the original choice for this role.
Mm-mm.
I believe it was Nicole Kidman, and I forget the other actress.
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oh,
Yeah,
Gwyneth Paltrow. That makes sense.
Yeah.
But
After World Tenenbaums. Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that it was her. I really like her in this movie. I wish she would work with Wes more. I know she was supposed to be the voice of Mrs. Fox, but didn't end up doing it. But I like how she's got baggage of her own too coming into this.
Yeah. She's a really interesting character because she kind of comes out of nowhere as far as, getting into the mix of all these crazy guys. And she gets there and we realize that she's just as crazy as they are, but in a different way. She's sitting there, like, our first big scene with her is she's sitting in her room reading a 8-volume novel out loud. And, Ned walks by. He's like, are you going to read that whole thing to yourself? And she's like, no, I'm reading it out loud to him. And we kind of get this, like, she's already going to be a crazy mom. Like, we got that. Like, she's already gearing up for it. But you kind of get to also see her hyper intellectual side. She's probably the most intelligent person in this film, apart from Angelica Houston. And I find it interesting because the two women are actually probably the most intellectual out of the whole group of this, ragtag group of characters.
Well, yeah, because even Anne Marie, all three of the women are the most.
Yep.
They're the most smart and intelligent people.
And the voices of reason of everything that goes on. It's the three women that really kind of try to hold the glue together, and the men are too busy just completely screwing it up. For, Anne Marie just ends up quitting because it's just, she's like, you don't listen to me, you don't care, you're a monster. And she's right. She's absolutely right, honestly. But yes, I find that interesting that the first big scene we get with Kate Blanchett, she's sitting alone in her room reading this book. And I think that's what intrigues Owen Wilson's character so much about her. Because he's probably
Mhm.
never had someone, he's never seen anyone do that before. Because he was probably an only child. He was raised by a single mom. And I'm sure, his mother wasn't an idiot or anything, but this is probably the first interaction he's had with being in close quarters like that with someone that intellectual, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, and I feel like that's probably like a Wes Anderson thing. He probably read to his pregnant wife when they were pregnant with his children, like some like big book or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The
Those
dictionary.
National Geographic.
Yeah.
And then that's the other thing is like, of course, Kate Blanchett is not attracted to Steve because she's a fan of him. So she kind of sees him as like a hero or an idol or even a father figure, sort of. So she's not going to get
Right.
that. And I hate when she's like, I'm too old when he catches her with Ned. And she's like, I'm too old for you. And he's like, but you're pregnant. Like, apparently that makes it
That makes it
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he almost views her as damaged goods.
Mm.
Like that's pretty much what exactly he says to her. Like, well, you're pregnant. You've already been used. So what does it matter? Like that.
And yeah, we have
pretty
that
much
in the
what he says to
background
her.
too. That she's had an affair with her boss, her editor, who's
Mhm.
married, but she's gonna have the baby.
Yeah, it's a very interesting moment of the morality of it. Like, where's your morals lie? Like, what do you
Mhm.
see? Do you see something wrong with any of this? And so I think that is that great like punch away of, you're too old for me, Steve. Well, you're pregnant. It's clear that you don't care. So why me being too old is too much for you? But she's drawing her boundaries, and he still doesn't see that that's what that is. Like, he still wants to be able to like punch through that. We're like, well, doesn't really matter then, right? It's like, yeah, it does matter. She's not into you, dude.
Yeah, that's a problem men have, and it's something that we all need to get better at. That it's okay if a woman we're attracted to is not attracted back to us. It's fine.
Yeah.
Let it
Don't get
go.
upset.
Be okay. Don't get all man baby and cry and make the woman feel bad for not being attracted to you. It's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Get over it. It happens.
It does happen. It does. It happens.
So, Bill Murray, calm down. You're married to Angelica Houston. What are you complaining about?
Right? The boss of everything, man.
Mm.
Like,
You have a
But
private
apparently,
island.
Kate Blanchett got pregnant while they were making this movie, and Wes Anderson's like, "Didn't you take method acting a little too seriously?"
Wow. And this was 04, so she must have come right off of Galadriel and went into this role.
mm-hmm.
Which makes her celestial. She's the queen of the elves.
Right.
She is. God, I just love her. She's
And
one
then,
of my favorite actresses, Kate Blanchett. I don't think I've seen anything that she's been in that I was like, ooh, you did a bad job. I may not have liked the film, but objectively speaking, like, nope, you've done everything correct. I love this.
yeah,
I love her.
there's a part of me that really wished that they had gone with the comic book route for the Thanos Infinity War Endgame saga, and he did it all just to impress Kate Blanchett's death.
Yeah. All for a chick. Click.
But the way Eleanor is in this movie reminds me of that skit we were talking about, Lindsay, that Patton Oswalt has, where he talks about how filmmaking, like the director's a dude and he's like all in there like just shooting the movie and everything, and then the editor's a woman. She's like, okay, let me come in here and like
Yeah.
try to fix this thing and let it make sense and clean up your mess. You just have film all over the place. You just going crazy.
Right.
I feel like
Marshall
that's what
Lucas,
Eleanor
we're
does.
looking
She's
at
like,
you.
Mm-hmm.
She's
Yeah.
like, okay.
That moment where Steve, when she's leaving because, she takes Ned's first death as a bad omen. And so she's leaving, and Steve's, begging her to stay. It's like, well, who's supposed to tell me all the scientific name of all the animals? I don't know that shit. And that right there just sums up their whole relationship. And it's like, damn, Steve, you're the worst. I
Yeah.
need you not because I love you. I need you because I will use you in editing. I'll use you for the movie I'm making, for the documentary I'm making. Not because I'm begging you to stay because I need you here, because I want you here and I love you. I want you here because I need you to tell me the scientific name of all the animals.
Yeah. Is there anything else? I mean, we could probably go on and on about this. Oh, there was something that reminded me. It's a little bit off topic, but you talk about hearing that song they play when they put Ned's body to sea.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I feel like I don't know if it's because I'm getting older, and I know that, I probably have, I don't want to get too deep and existential, but, I probably have less days ahead of me than more, or because I've suffered more loss now as a human, but I am so much easier to drop at a hat and cry in a movie than I used to be.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I was the funeral was sad, but when Bill Murray broke down, like at the end, I was like, I'm glad the lights are off.
Well, I
I'm sitting there
didn't
tearing
cry
up.
in this movie, but I just rewatched Star Trek 2, and I don't know if because Leonard Nimoy is dead in real life now, but like I was crying like a baby when William Shatner does his eulogy
Oh
for
man, that
Spock.
gets me. That still gets me. That and Forrest Gump will get me every time when he buries Jenny, and I'm like, no, can't do it.
It's
So
amazing to me what will make me do that, because this movie, I've watched it again. I told you 100+ times. It gets me. I don't usually cry. This 2 times ago when I watched it at Ned's funeral, like I couldn't keep it together. I was just bawling. I was like, apparently I was not emotionally available for that moment.
Man,
That really struck me like that before, but that moment at that time got me. It was another time I was watching, because another movie I obsess about is any 3 of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I was watching it one time, never really got me. The moment where Eowyn like rips her helmet off and she's like, I'm no man. I was like, I felt that. I felt that right now. I just started crying. So yeah, no, I don't know when it strikes.
Hap and Leonard got me the other day. We were in finishing the 3rd season of Hap and Leonard, and they're like, it's after, because it jumps back and forth, and I don't want to ruin it if you've seen it, but they're beat to hell, both of them, and they're both sitting there at the kitchen table, and they're having a moment between themselves, and it's like they're opening up, and Leonard starts crying, and I'm like, wow, man, that's a really good friend moment between these 2 dudes that like know, karate, and just got finished beating up a bunch of clan members, and they're beat to hell and back, and they're really opening up, and I was like, man, that part really got me. But yeah, I'll cry. I'll yeah, in my later years, I've started to do that too. So I'm pretty sure here after 40, I'll just start breaking down at phone commercials.
Oh my God! Don't let me see a trailer about a dog.
Oh yeah.
I will.
Yeah.
I will embarrass Sarah. We'll go to the movies. I can't remember what movie we went to see, but it was the one like The Dog's Purpose or A Dog's Life. I don't know. It came out a couple of years ago. It was just the trailer, and I was like, like in the movie theater, like ugly girl crying, like not just like, okay, keep it together in tears. It was like I was losing it. Sarah was like, get it together. What are you doing? Why are you crying at this thing? And I'm like, I mean, it was horrible. And
That
Sarah
reminds
teases
me.
She's like, you want to watch that movie? I was like, no, I couldn't even make it through the damn trailer. There's no way I can watch that movie. What's wrong with you? I still haven't seen Marley and Me for that exact reason. There's
Yeah,
no
I'm
way
not
I could
gonna
listen
watch
to
that.
that movie.
That
Ugh.
reminds me of a story with one of our very good friends. She's so much a dog person. And we had went to go see Fantastic Beast, and they had just shown a trailer for Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which she did not like the first Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh no.
And so my
sorry.
wife turns to her and says, "You don't have a soul." And then that dog commercial, which she was just joking, because
Yeah.
we're like, how can you not love Groot?
Yeah.
Anyways,
Right.
so then that dog movie trailer comes on, and she's like bawling too, and she's like, "What?" Like, she's just an emotional wreck over that trailer after they
Oh,
showed the
man.
Guardians of the Galaxy, and my wife just teasing her because she didn't like the movie. So it
Right.
happens.
Oh my gosh.
I think we can get into rankings unless there's some more Steve Zissou underwater shenanigans we want to talk about.
Okay, let's
Mhm.
do it. Let's rank.
All right, Samantha, for the Wes Anderson rankings, here's what I have come up with. So if you love the movie, if you think it's great, we call it a, what did I call it? I know what a good ranking is. Like if you enjoy the film, you find it entertaining, it's a nice attire. Do you remember what I had it as the best, Chris?
Oh man. Was it a solid ensemble?
A great ensemble. That's what
Great
it is. It's
ensemble.
a
The
great
great
ensemble. Because he's all about the matching and everything and the symmetry. If the movie you think is a little more cultish, it's just for fans, or it's a little obscure, we're gonna say a deep dive. If it doesn't quite come together, it's a little mediocre. It didn't quite make it up to snuff. We're gonna say style over substance, style over story. And then if it's a complete failure, just didn't work at all, it's a beautiful failure.
Gotcha.
Because of course it's going to be a pretty movie, even if it's bad.
Right. Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, I mean, I have to go with great ensemble because it's my favorite Wes Anderson movie. It's in my top favorite movies of all time. It's in the top 5, which is a pretty impressive feat for me. This for me is always going to be a great ensemble. Like always, it's just a perfect film. Wes Anderson made it for me, just for me. I would also, if you're not into Wes Anderson or you're just kind of discovering Wes Anderson, I could also argue that it's a deep dive. And it's because what we've talked about previously throughout this is it is the most Wes Anderson-y. It is the most stylized piece. If you don't get Wes Anderson or you're still trying to figure out what's going on, I could see that it might take you a little while to get into this particular film. That's one of the things I tell people all the time. Like, do you like Wes Anderson? The people who haven't seen this movie. Like, do you like Wes Anderson? And if they say yes, then I'm like, watch it. You're going to love it. If they say no, I say, well, watch it because it's pretty. That's usually where I split with it. If they like Wes Anderson, I'm like, watch it. You're going to love it. If they don't like Wes Anderson, watch it because it's pretty. Because they're not gonna like it like I want them to.
Right. Yeah, if someone told me they didn't like Wes Anderson, this and Darjeeling would probably be the two I would least recommend.
Yeah.
I would probably recommend to them Grand Budapest or Moonrise Kingdom if they're not fans. I'd be like, well, at least watch those two because I think you might find something you enjoy in those two movies.
Yep.
That might get on your nerves for his other movies. And his first 3 movies, maybe, because there's less of Royal Tenenbaums is where it starts.
Mm-hmm.
But there's less of that visual aesthetic in those earlier films that he just doubles down on with each new movie. The other interesting thing about this film is this is the first time him and Owen Wilson didn't collaborate on script. I guess Owen Wilson becomes more demand actor and is too busy to be writing scripts, and his roles, for the most part, are this is a pretty big role, but he gets smaller roles with each movie. But that's also probably because he's getting to work with a lot of different actors too.
Right. It's because Wes Anderson. I love that Wes Anderson wants to repeat actors. Like he has his favorites. It's very much kind of like what we were talking about earlier with Tarantino and the Coen brothers.
Mhm.
You know, they always have the handful of same actors that they love that they keep putting in, and surprisingly, they share some of the same actors. Frances McDermott, I'm looking at you. Where was I going with this? My brain just said, "You have an idea." No, you don't. I love that he uses the same handful of actors, but he also will branch out. That he'll bring in, you know, other people, and he knows who he likes. He knows what he likes. He also knows what he doesn't like. Like I'm pretty sure we'll never see Gene Hackman in another Wes Anderson film. I don't think he'll come back.
No, he's
Not at
enjoying
90.
being
I don't think he's
retired
coming
and riding
back
his
at all.
bike at 91 years old.
Yeah. But even so, if he
Good for
wasn't,
him, though.
he wouldn't be back.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Oh, what do you think, Chris and Lindsay? Where would you guys rank this amongst his work?
Well, Lindsay hasn't made it back yet, but I am going to have to go with a great ensemble because I absolutely love this film. I think it's one of my probably my top two of his, if I had to break it down the best I could. Because like you said, it's like trying to choose, your favorite ice cream flavor. It's really hard to do that. But I think because of my love for National Geographic and the ocean and whatnot, I really have to go with this one and give it a great ensemble.
Okay, well, I guess I'll be the party pooper. I'm gonna give it a nice attire. I enjoy this movie. I enjoy it more now than I initially did the first time I watched it. I've never disliked this movie. It's just for me, it's not my favorite. I like the more personal stories, and I like where he goes. As I think he improves as a director after this movie.
I agree with you on that.
I
can
do
definitely agree with
think
you on that.
this should also be counted as Henry Selick's 5th film, though, because of how well the stop motion animation film is in this. Like, I don't think he gets enough credit for the work in this movie.
Right.
I agree. The stop motion for me, like I said, when I first saw it, didn't like it. Now I absolutely love it. The stop motion is so beautifully done. It's so good. God, I love it. And the puppet that they make for the jaguar shark is the largest puppet made for stop motion. And they actually filmed the scenes upside down, so it looked like the jaguar shark had even more drag as it was being pulled through the water.
That's cool.
Just a fun fact.
And I like, this is the beginning of him collaborating with Mr. Greta Gerwig, Noah Baumbach. I sometimes prefer these movies over Noah Baumbach's own movies, but I haven't seen all of his films, so I can't be a fair judger of his filmography. I like quite a bit of his films, but I know some of his stuff's just not my jam.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Samantha, for coming on and passionately talking about Steve Zissou with us.
Anytime anyone mentions Steve Zissou or Life Aquatic, I'm there. I mean, it's my favorite film, and I can really, if we wanted to, like, let's loop around and start all over again and talk about everything else. Like, yep, let's go for it. Get into it. So yeah, these characters, I think these are my favorite cast of characters. Like I said, it was in my top 5 movies. As far as characters go, these are my favorite characters of a film. This is it. These are my favorite characters. So that's saying something. So I'm so glad that you guys had me back. We could talk about it, get into Wes Anderson, get into this film. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I'm glad I got to meet you and finally be on a show with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And is there anything you want to plug, or if people want to find you on social media?
I mean, I'm kind of lame and boring. You can find me on Facebook and follow me if you want to be my friend. I'm on Instagram. I post pictures of my cats all the time, so you can look at cute cats. Apart from that, I live a pretty boring teacher life. So no, nothing really I want to plug unless I will say this: if you live in the Dallas Metroplex and you want to get in on the spooky season, the Palace Theater in downtown Grapevine is showing Bride of Frankenstein on October 1st.
Ooh.
The tickets are only $6 in the historic Palace Theater. I've got my tickets. Show out, show up, have a good time.
Nice.
That's my plug.
I will say that is, in my opinion, that is one of the rare sequels that is actually better than the original. I love
Yes.
Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes, I love
And
the Universal Monsters. Do that one. Do that coming
Ooh,
up.
all of
Do
them.
Universal Monsters, and then just tell me which one you want me to do, and I'll do it because I love all of them. So
any of them, huh? I could be like,
they're all my favorite.
you're doing Creature from the Black Lagoon. You'd
I'm
be
on
like,
it.
okay.
I love it. You want to talk about it? I'm on it.
And I will also say, Son of Frankenstein's a good movie too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty much the same plot as Young Frankenstein, except that it's not a comedy.
Yeah, you're
It's
right.
the same movie.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
What? Sorry that Lindsay's not here to give her ranking. Maybe she'll tell us later what she thinks of Steve
Yeah,
Zissou.
we should be a little more stable for Blade 2 this evening. So
Yeah, I know. I understand. It's okay. But we're going to be back with the whimsical world of Wes Anderson in about 3 weeks with Manette Bryant to talk about the Darjeeling Limited and all about the family dysfunction of that film and how maybe we all relate to that a little bit. And then we're going to be back tonight for the fantastical world of Guillermo del Toro with a guest to talk about Blade 2. And then Samantha is going to join us later when we get to Crimson Peak. Going to get all up in our gothic romance for that film.
That'll be fun.
I'm ready.
So thank you so much, Samantha, again for coming on and talking with us. It's always a pleasure. I love your energy and enthusiasm for the films that you pick.
Thank you. I'm very enthusiastic about things I love. So yes, thank you.
And yes, PSA for everyone out there, if you are out and about and trying to enjoy your lives, because I guess this is just how we have to adapt to the world we live in now, please be safe, wear a mask, and be considerate of other people. That's why we wear masks.
Wash your hands.
Also, because I'm so paranoid and hypochondriac, when I hear someone cough or sneeze, I'm like, my mask on.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I'm not full blown Bill Murray and What About Bob yet, but I'm getting close. Damn it. So
I mean, I was double masked at the fan thing last weekend. I was like, there's too
Smart
many
man.
people.
Yeah.
But it was fun. But Samantha, thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. And everybody else, have a wonderful, safe weekend. It's a little hot today than it has been, but still enjoy that it's only 90 degrees instead of like 109.
Not 90 today and tomorrow, and then back down into the mid to low 80s for the foreseeable future. I'm all there for that. Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Same.
All right. Well, thank you again. Always love having you on, and we're going to call it a day. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.